admire Media.Monks, and actually we'd class them as a competitor. We do, as you know, data-led creative with production expertise. So it's a similar industry, and I totally get why everything's going digital, why everything's going data. And I mean, looking ahead, and I totally appreciate that you probably say this to many, many people, but looking ahead over 12, 18, 36 months, that kind of duration, where do you kind of see the world going? Because the pandemic, as you and I both said over email together, hasn't necessarily stemmed anything truly innovative in our industry. It's merely just brought it forwards.
It's accelerated at a hyper speed. I just brought it forward. So, what comes out of it? I mean, 21 is a very strong year because GDP growth is at 5 to 6%. Why? Because of the monetary and fiscal stimulus. And 22 looks as though it will be very similar, maybe 4 to 5%. I was on a call yesterday evening, which sort of suggested, there was the fiscal impulse will be less in 22 than 21 because it will start to get into taper territory. But the simple fact is that worldwide GDP growth with relatively little inflation, although inflation is building, for 2 years will be at 5 to 6 and 4 to 5. It doesn't get any better than that. So anybody listening to this, now is the time to make hay while the sun shines. I mean, 5 to 6 GDP growth 1 year, 4 to 5 the next. We ain't seen this for many, many years. And you have to remember, you go back to the 70s or the 80s, yes. You've got those sort of numbers, but with inflation at way higher than we're looking at now. So real growth is huge at the moment. So that's one thing. So the tailwind from GDP growth and the fiscal stimulus is huge. My worry is what happens in 23, not to S4, because the second tailwind, digital transformation, again, on that call last night, which was with one of the big investment houses, which, what do you learn from the Q2 results of Google and Amazon and Apple and Facebook last week? And what you learn is that digital transformation has become even more important. It was quite interesting that the guy who was analyzing the results of the FANGs last week said, what you take away, it sounds a bit trite, is that digital transformation is even more important. So transformation, so that's the second tailwind. Now the holding companies are in trouble because 60 or 70% of their business is analog, and they can't adjust their structures as rapidly as cleanly as they would like to do. So I would say, what we've learned from the pandemic is, three things: hyperspeed is digital transformation. Change agents inside companies who want to push the company forward are getting much more oxygen today. So that's number one. Number two, the underlying economic conditions are very strong. And number three, digital transformation has been significantly pushed up the agenda. It is probably number one or close to number one on every CEO's agenda. I would say US-China relations, or lack of them, is the other big thing, because if the second largest market in the world is difficult to enter or is subject to the volatility that we've seen, as the Chinese government makes it difficult in certain areas. I mean, figuring that one out is going to become more and more important.